Hello! Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. This quote by Nietzsche serves as the opening line to the film. Everything new and unexplainable becomes a mirror of the human soul. What will you see in the darkness? Scary monsters? Or unexplored mysteries that conceal much more than just death and destruction? A young man, disillusioned with civilized society, goes to a remote island to live there as a hermit. But instead of solving his problems, he only encounters more questions and mysteries.
I have decided to give her a name. Daenerys.
September 1914. A young Englishman has been on the ship for 67 days now. The captain helps him light a cigarette, and through binoculars, shows him an island, the long-awaited destination where the guy will spend the next year. The man asks what he's running away from. That's the first thing sailors are asked when they go to sea. The Englishman doesn't reply. The team lands on the shore. For some reason, there are no birds around as they carry the suitcases over the rocks. The captain finds it alarming that the previous meteorologist did not come out to meet them. His cabin too turns out to be utterly ruined and desolate. The captain begins to worry, but the guy shrugs it off. He's fine with it.
With respect, I am responsible for your safe passage, and this is hardly reassuring.
During the voyage, the man has become friends with his passenger and orders the crew to help explore the area. On their way to the lighthouse, they find a spring and an inscription on a rock. Gruner owns this fountain. The captain decides to send the crew away and goes to the lighthouse with the Englishman. Its walls and windows turn out to be fortified with sharpened stakes, and no one comes when they knock on the door. The guy breaks the lock with his shoulder, and the travelers go upstairs where they find a naked sleeping man. It is the lighthouse keeper, who introduces himself as Gruner. The captain is supposed to take the previous meteorologist, named Aldor Vigeland, back to the ship, but the keeper says that he died of typhus. There is no grave because the guy simply stood up and left, and Gruner never saw him again. The only thing the keeper is interested in is whether the guy has tobacco with him. The captain is clearly suspicious of the long-haired and withdrawn old man, but decides not to confront him. But the Englishman is not frightened by the death of his predecessor, and escorts the man to the boat. Upon parting, the captain wants to give the guy his revolver, but the lad confidently refuses the gift. He returns to the cabin, where he will be measuring the direction and strength of the winds, and live for a year as an exile. Under the soft light of the fireplace and oil lamps, the guy unpacks his suitcases and sets up the equipment. He finds the journal of the previous meteorologist, which details the flora and fauna of the island. Between the pages, he finds a photograph of a woman in a wedding dress. On the back is the inscription, Miss Vigeland, 1908, love, love, love. The Englishman keeps exploring the journal and discovers very odd drawings with the caption, Darwin was wrong. They show reptiles with human arms and legs devouring humans and having intercourse with them. The last page shows the lighthouse standing in pitch black darkness with dark figures on the coast below it. In the morning, the meteorologist finds a circle of black rocks on the beach with white seashells laid out inside. The guy carries out his work, looking out over the raging ocean, and observes his strange neighbor in the lighthouse through binoculars. Resting in the cabin in the evening, the guy hears someone scratching at the front door of the house. Thinking it is Gruner, he walks closer, but suddenly a black hand appears from under the door. The Englishman steps on it several times with his boot, causing the creature to scream in pain and back away. Growling and stomping descends upon the hut from all sides, and the lad quickly hops into the cellar, taking a knife with him. He hears the monsters kicking in the door and wandering around the room. The man hopes to see them through a crack in the boards, but the sounds fade and nobody appears. Suddenly, the monster looks directly into his eyes. The guy immediately stabs the visitor through the slit, and blood splashes on the floor. This forces the creature to retreat, but the Englishman blocks the hatch anyway and spends the night in the cellar. The next day, he sees drops of blood and footprints in the sand that lead out to the sea. The meteorologist runs to the lighthouse and calls for Gruner, but he doesn't open the door, only spills a bucket of dirty liquid in the guy's direction.
Please let me in. Should have stayed on the boat. Gruner!
The man hides inside the lighthouse, and the newcomer can only hurl stones at the balcony in despair. He is left with no choice but to turn his frail wooden hut into a fortress. He places stakes around the entrance, seals the windows, and surrounds the hut with wood and the books he has brought with him, dousing them with lamp oil. He then locks the door and loads the rifle he had found inside. After sunset, the light of the lighthouse illuminates the shore as the sea creatures crawl out of the water. They head straight for the cabin and start breaking into it. They break the windows, and the guy starts shooting the creatures off. He frantically fires round after round, But once he realizes that there are too many enemies, he sets his fortifications on fire with a torch. This maneuver scares the monsters away, but a moment later the whole structure becomes engulfed in flames as well. The guy burns his palms trying to put out the fire at the front door, and realizes that the only option is to get out of the house. He abandons his hiding place and runs towards the coastal cliffs. The creatures seem to have returned to the sea, so he can relax for a while. A downpour begins, under which he will have to spend the whole night. At dawn, the Englishman returns to the hut, half destroyed by fire. He can no longer find shelter here. He bandages his wounds, takes the rifle, and heads for the lighthouse. The guy is lying in wait for Gruner, who also takes his gun and goes outside for fresh water. At the spring, the meteorologist sees the man and gets ready to shoot him. Suddenly, a creature with gray skin lunges at him. The guy fights off and knocks the monster on its back. It growls just like the sea creatures that attacked him at night. But for some reason, it is dressed in human clothes. Gruner yells for the newcomer not to shoot and lowers his rifle.
What do you want?
Do I really need to spell it out?
Continuing to threaten the creature. The guy agrees to share tobacco, alcohol, and ammunition with Gruner. The man explains that the creature is harmless. It is a female, and he calls her to his leg like a dog. Gruner decides to call the newcomer friend from now on, and together they go to the cabin for supplies. There, the Englishman voices his suspicions that the previous meteorologist did not die of illness, but because Gruner left him there to die alone. The man doesn't reply to this. He says they must hurry. The night will fall soon. In the morning, the guy wakes up to the creature licking his burned hand. Gruner comes in, explaining that their saliva has medicinal properties. He also informs him that he has been asleep for a couple of days due to the recent stress, and has even wet himself. The Englishman follows Gruner upstairs, where the man counts the ammunition. It turns out they have almost 2,000 bullets. At this time, the creature, who is used to living on the sea bottom, places rocks on top of the boxes to keep them from floating up. The guy learns that Gruner doesn't understand the creature's language, but commands her like her owner, and she faithfully obeys him without trying to escape. Friend is amazed by this beast and comes closer to examine her. He has read about fish that were isolated from other species and have had their own unique evolutionary path. Gruner is alarmed by the boy's excessive interest.
She's not quite like the others, is she?
This one doesn't bite, that's all.
When Friend hints at the scar on the man's shoulder, the latter replies that the biting only happened once. She paid for it and learned her lesson. While the creature huddles on the floor in fear, Gruner invites Friend to the top of the lighthouse. He explains that he has reconstructed the lantern to scare the creatures away because they are afraid of all kinds of light. The newcomer asks why the man did not leave the dangerous island on the ship, but Gruner hates civilization far more than he hates the army of reptiles trying to kill him. He asks the guy, who has also decided to stay despite all the warning signs, the same question. The lad's resolve has waned in the last couple of days, and he intends to signal the first ship that sails by. With a smirk, Gruner replies that it will happen exactly 1 year from now. This lighthouse was not built for the purpose of navigation, but to launder budget funds. The guy laments that all his belongings are gone, and the island is not at all what he expected it to be. He is completely cut off from his past. He begins to mark the passing days on the wall, as he finds an old diving suit in the drawers. The creature visits him and starts eating candles. The guy doesn't know how to communicate with her yet. Gruner sees them and calls the Englishman upstairs with a rifle. Torches are lit on the balcony, and the lighthouse lamp shines brightly. Armed to the teeth, Gruner fires a flare towards the coast. He explains to Friend that he must shoot when the enemies get close, and if they smell dead meat, they will begin to devour each other. Gruner's pet is behind a gate in an enclosure above them and starts making strange, loud noises. Creatures start crawling from everywhere, and the old man begins to shoot them off. But for some reason, Friend cannot bring himself to pull the trigger. He backs away, watching Gruner as he fights off the monsters that climb up the balcony. Panic overwhelms him, and the guy passes out. In the morning, an angry Gruner wakes him up. The old man's voice breaks, and he speaks of himself in the third person like a madman. He calls Friend dead weight and demands that he fetch water from the spring. The guy fills 2 buckets, and when he comes back, discovers Gruner in bed with the creature. There is an awkward silence between the housemates over dinner, which is broken by Gruner. He says he's giving Friend one last chance. After sunset, they go out onto the balcony, but when the guy starts shooting, the keeper goes inside the lighthouse and locks the doors behind him. The newcomer begs not to leave him alone, but Gruner only listens in silence to the screams and gunshots, and soon falls asleep. Upon awakening at dawn, he opens the door to find Friend bloodied, but alive. Since then, the 2 men fight off the incoming monsters together at night, with the creature's numbers growing larger with each attack. To keep his place inside outside the lighthouse, the guy does the most thankless work. He meditates and recalls the books he's read in the past to preserve his sanity.
Good warrior is not defined by the cause he defends, but rather by the meaning that derives from the struggle.
The man was looking for peace away from humans, but all he found was a demon-infested hell. As the weeks pass, the bearded Englishman discusses his theory with Gruner. He thinks that their pets' moans attract the creatures. That would explain why they don't attack every night. Gruner believes that the sea creatures simply want to destroy the strangers who have come to their island. Although there have been no attacks for quite some time, the old man forces his friend to regularly bring in wood. He goes to the burnt-out cabin, where he finds a mirror and shaves for the first time in a long while. Out of boredom, the Englishman has explored the island through and through and has begun to collect vertebrae of a huge whale skeleton to carve crafts out of them. The endless anticipation of the monster's return is maddening, and the lad tries to somehow explain their absence by winter hibernation or admission of defeat. Gruner, as usual, simplifies the creature's behavior by comparing them to fish, which are huddling into a pack for now, and will definitely attack again. Given the old man's attitude towards the creatures, Friend cannot understand how he can sleep with one of them. Why is he not disgusted by her cold skin? But the lad himself does not see her as an enemy and gives her a name, Anaris. One night, Gruner suggests that they play chess. While relaxing during the game, the Englishman begins to speculate about the amazing features of the creatures again, their blood, which protects them from the cold, and the two pairs of eyelids.
We could capture specimen, take them back to Great Britain or to the United States, present our discovery, and we would be celebrated.
Gruner rudely interrupts his train of thought. The last thing the old man wants is to become famous. The newcomer easily beats his opponent, but suddenly they are interrupted by a creature tearing through the door. They got carried away and forgot to turn on the lighthouse lamp. They barricade the first floor and begin to fight back on the balcony. But the army of creatures is even larger than usual this time, and they are everywhere. The men retreat inside the lighthouse, and Gruner gets badly wounded in the leg. Friend helps him stop the bleeding, and they lock themselves next to the lantern. But the light soon goes out as the creatures damage the mechanism, anticipating imminent death. Gruner begins to sing a lullaby, but the men are saved by the first rays of dawn, which drive the enemies away. Later, Anaris tends to her master's wounds, and the guy says that they will not survive the next battle. Supplies are running out, and they won't have enough strength to repel another army. The Englishman goes to the coast, where he finds a strange object consisting of tied ropes and pieces of wood. He begins to study it when he suddenly notices a ship on the horizon. The guy rushes to the lighthouse, hoping to give it a signal, but as he tries to use the flare gun, Gruner attacks him.
Gruner knows how to defend himself. Gruner rules the world. Gruner wants what he has, and has only what he wants.
He knocks Friend to the ground, but Anaris growls at her master, forcing him to let Friend go. Gruner is about to beat her with a belt, but the guy gets between them. In a last-ditch effort, he lunges for the flare gun, but the old man is faster again. He leaves, and Friend yells curses after him, calling him a miserable misanthrope who only needs others to have someone to hate.
You're too afraid to let your friends leave! Too afraid to kill your enemies!
Later, he overhears Gruner shouting and beating Anaris for disobedience. Suddenly, she runs out of the lighthouse, and Friend follows her to the coast, leaving his rifle by the rock. He cautiously approaches her and shows her the ship he carved out of whalebone. Friend sympathizes with Anaris, and she leads him after her, showing him the dinghy stranded in the sand on the shore. Friend returns to the lighthouse and reports his find to Gruner, but the latter already knew about it. The old man does not think it is possible to sail off the island alive. They won't stand a chance against the cold, the storm, and the attacks of sea creatures. When asked about the origin of the dinghy, Gruner answers that a Portuguese ship got wrecked in a storm near the island, and the survivors sailed on it to the shore. While they were making their way to the lighthouse, the monsters dragged down all of them. They were smugglers who had strayed from the trade routes on purpose. There was dynamite on the ship, and several crates got swept to the shore. Gruner says that it has become damp and spoiled, but Friend intends to retrieve the crates from the bottom and shows the diving suit he has found. He wants to fix the dinghy and swim to the wreck. Dynamite would help blow up 1,000 creatures at once, but the old man flatly refuses to go to sea. The guy begins fixing the boat alone, and one day he hears Anaris singing while bathing in the spring. He decides to take his mind off work and join her. They are spotted by a jealous Gruner. Later, he decides to agree to Friend's proposal, apparently hoping that he will not return from the sea bottom. They get in the boat and reach the shipwreck. The guy puts on a diving suit and plunges into the icy water. He walks along the seabed while Gruner is pumping air for him. Friend places crates of dynamite on a hook, and his partner pulls them up with a winch. Suddenly, the diver sees one of the little creatures right in front of him, and from fright, falls backward in the heavy suit. Gruner pulls another crate up and stops pumping air. The guy yanks on the hose, asking for help, but the man doesn't react. Slowly suffocating, Friend sees childlike creatures above him, floating around him without attacking. Realizing there is no other choice, he gets out of the suit and floats to the surface with the last of his strength. Gruner helps him into the dinghy. Back at the lighthouse, they open the boxes of dynamite. The first one is completely ruined. Annoyed, Gruner slams the lid, but the others turn out to be dry inside, and the men begin to bury the explosives around the lighthouse in 2 lines.
Second line's too close to the lighthouse.
At this distance, the toes will be packed in nice and tight.
Friend worries that the second one is too close to the walls and would turn the lighthouse into the Tower of Pisa in case of an explosion. Then the first snow begins to fall from the sky. The next week passes without any attacks, but anxiety keeps the men busy, and every night they keep watch at their post. One morning, Friend discovers a stiffened Gruner, who has spent the entire night on the balcony with his hand on the detonator. The guy leads the man inside and disconnects the wires from the box. 3 more weeks pass without a single shot being fired. When an heiress brings in the starfish she caught in the sea, Gruner snaps at her.
You told your friends, huh? You warned them, didn't you? You little toad spy.
Friend stops the beating of an heiress, and the old man decides that they need to finish off the creatures as soon as possible. He wants to ambush them by leaving the door open and blow them all up. When the keeper leaves, the boy calms the terrified heiress down. That night, Friend stays at the open door surrounded by lamps, and Gruner takes Daenerys out onto the balcony, forcing her to sing. She is rather crying from the way her master treats her, but soon her kinsmen emerge from the water. On the stairs, the wind blows out some of the lamps, and the Englishman puts aside his rifle to light up the fire again. At this time, a large male pounces on him. The guy manages to fight him off with a knife. He climbs up the stairs, firing off the creatures, and yells for Gruner to activate the explosives. But after pushing the lever, nothing happens. Friend realizes that he forgot to reconnect the wires and runs upstairs to correct his mistake. Gruner covers him, and the guy manages to activate the explosion on the first line, killing most of the attackers. But Gruner immediately grabs the second lever and detonates the line next to the lighthouse. The shockwave knocks them both back into the wall, and the men lose consciousness. In the morning, the bloodied Friend wakes up first and shakes up Gruner, who also turns out to be alive. They go to the shore, where Gruner finishes off the surviving enemies. The guy sees one of the wounded creatures wearing clothes and a pendant around his neck, and can't bring himself to finish him off. Gruner does it for him. Friend removes the bone necklace and shows it to the man.
Look at what we've done.
Without remorse, Gruner throws the pendant away. That night, the creatures do not attack, but the men hear from the balcony the sad howl that Daenerys is making down on the coast. Gruner explains that this is how he found her as a baby, when she got entangled in a fishing net. The old man says they can even be cute until they grow up, and Daenerys always comes crawling back after crying sufficiently. Still shocked by what they've done, Friend replies, "They're grieving." The next day, the guy goes to the shore, where he spots 2 sea children in the water. He wants to give them some kind of sign, and recalls the circle he found on his first morning on the island. He makes one out of stones, and puts a whalebone boat in the center. When he returns to the lighthouse, Gruner loads their rifles with sand ammunition, so they can continue to scare the creatures away. Friend ignores him and goes to the balcony, where he checks on his gift to the creatures through binoculars. In the morning, the guy finds an empty bottle and a deck of tarot cards next to Gruner. In an open box of cards, he finds a wedding photo with the words love on the back. The groom is Gruner, the same Aldor Vigland, the previous meteorologist. He has survived, but has lost his mind because of the harsh conditions and loneliness. The Englishman goes downstairs, where he erases the day count from the wall, which he had been keeping since he came to the lighthouse. Afterwards, he goes outside and checks on the stone circle. The creatures did take the ship after all. One of the children happens to be nearby, and Friend throws a torch on the ground so as not to scare him away. The child approaches the man, and Daenerys and the rest of the sea people follow him. She seems to be on their side now. The kid is about to return the bone boat to Friend, but they are interrupted by Gruner, who has woken up. He runs out and begins firing his rifle, but Friend stops him.
See you, king of the toads?
Don't harm them, Gruner. The truce is what I think they want.
He asks him to lower his weapon, but the madman only sees enemies in front of him, despite all the signs to the contrary. Gruner orders Anaris to go to the house, but she does not obey. The man realizes that he has lost control over her and is now alone against them all. Despair overwhelms him.
Gruner leaves. No one leaves Gruner.
He cries and runs away, losing what remains of his fragile mind. Friend approaches Anaris, but suddenly a flare missile hits the child right in the chest, killing him. The creatures retreat into the water, and with them Anaris, who remains on the shore for just a moment longer to say goodbye to Friend. Enraged, the guy runs to the lighthouse and attacks Gruner. They roll down the stairs, and the old man throws the Englishman off. He grabs an axe to finish him off, but Friend shouts out the meteorologist's real name, declaring Aldor Vigland is not a murderer. Shocked by these words, Gruner replies, "Love, love, love." He goes to the shore and looks up into the starry sky he sang about in his lullaby. Here, the creatures surround him and avenge all their brethren who have perished because of him. Aldor does not resist. Friend hears the screams of the dying man and closes the door. He is left alone and doesn't know when the ship will come for him. His gaze grows dim and his hand mechanically reaches for the axe. Sometime later, 3 men walk up the stairs to the top floor of the lighthouse. They wake up a hairy man who has made quite a pigsty of the place. The captain points to his companion, the new meteorologist, and asks Gruner where to find his predecessor. They only hear one word from the silent man, typhus.
You're in no fit state to hold the position of signal technician. We're at war, man. Get back here.
While the captain orders a search of the island, the man goes to the balcony where he sees several warships near the shore. Far from the lighthouse, Anaris is hiding among the rocks and then runs to the cliff. She dives into the water and swims off into the distance to her kin. The film is based on the novel of the same name by the Catalan author Albert Sanchez Piñol. In the book, the main character also has no name, but does have a backstory that was not included in the film. He was a fighter for Irish independence who became disillusioned with the success of his cause and decided to become a hermit, taking a job on the island. The island itself is located somewhere in the South Atlantic Ocean, close to Antarctica. Also, things become clearer if you consider that the name Anaris spelled backwards means a siren in Catalan. The poor actress who played her had to spend 3 to 8 hours a day having her makeup applied. As always, you can find the name of the movie in the video description. In the meantime, let us know in the comments. Would you agree to live alone for a year away from civilization? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like so that more awesome stories come out as often as possible.